I didn't even see it the first time. That's the part that still gets to me. You expect monsters to be visible. A shadow under the hull, a blip on sonar shaped like something you can point at and say, there. But this thing, it was absence. I was stationed out of Sasebo, assigned to acoustic monitoring for fleet exercises in the East China Sea. I wasn't some action hero. I sat in a dim room layered with screens and spectrograms, headphones pressed into my skull 12 hours at a time, listening to the ocean breathe through hydrophones. Sonar is intimate work. You learn the difference between cargo ships and destroyers by rhythm alone. You can tell when shrimp beds flare up on the seabed because the clicks get chaotic. You learn that whales sing in long arcs, submarines hum in disciplined lines, and storms rumble like distant artillery. You learn what belongs. The first anomaly came in quiet. 3 vessels reported structural anomalies within a 2-week span. Not collisions, not mines, just holes. Perfectly circular breaches in lower hull plating. No explosive residue, no outward buckling. The metal was bent inward, like something had punched through from the outside. I remember staring at the damage photos. The hole edges were smooth, clean sheer, as if a massive blunt instrument had struck with impossible precision. The brass blamed corrosion and pressure fatigue. I replayed the hydrophone logs from each incident. At first, nothing. Then I slowed the playback, and I heard it, a faint subsonic vibration just before impact, not mechanical, organic, low frequency, like something dragging along the seabed. The vibration would spike, then silence. Then the hull breach alarm. 3 ships, same pattern, same depth range, and always at night. 2 weeks later, I was on shift when the 4th happened. JS Kirishima reported sudden hull compromise during routine patrol. No contact, no visible threat. But I had the hydrophones live this time. I heard it clearly. A long, rasping tremor across the ocean floor. Not moving fast, not charging, gliding. The waveform wasn't symmetrical like propellers. It wasn't chaotic like seismic activity. It had rhythm, segmented, like multiple heavy masses shifting in sequence. I zoomed the grid. The tremor originated nearly 900 meters below the vessel. Too deep for divers, too shallow for tectonic vent fields. The tremor paused directly beneath the ship. There was a split-second harmonic spike. Then metal screamed through my headset, not over comms, through the water. The hull breach alarm followed. My hands went cold. I rewound the acoustic file, slowed it to 10%. The rasping tremor wasn't random. It was something extending upward, like a cable uncoiling, or like something lunging vertically. I reported it. My supervisor told me to log it as unidentified seabed interference. But the word interference felt wrong. This wasn't interference. It was predation. The 5th incident changed everything. The vessel didn't survive. A coastal research ship, civilian, mapping sediment layers off Nagasaki. At 1:12, their emergency beacon flared. At 1:13, it cut. We replayed the hydrophones over and over. The tremor started deeper this time, over 1,200 meters, a heavy sliding motion across silt. Then, a sudden acceleration upward. The waveform stretched almost vertically on the depth map. I remember the room going completely still as we watched the acoustic spike climb. Then there was a sound I can't describe properly, a violent suction, followed by a tearing resonance. The research vessel's hull didn't just breach, it ruptured, and the tremor didn't stop afterward. It descended again, slowly, dragging something heavy with it. There were no survivors, no debris field, just a widening stain on surface radar. That's when they brought me into the briefing room. No windows, no phones, just high-ranking officers and a projection of the sonar data I'd isolated. One of them said the word first. Unicidae, bobbit worms, polychaetes, that burrow in sand and ambush prey with explosive speed. I'd seen them in documentaries, 3 feet long at most, camouflaged, violent, but manageable. The scale on the sonar suggested something closer to 40 meters, minimum. The upward lunge speed was impossible for a simple invertebrate, unless it wasn't simple, unless it had been feeding, on ballast, on hull metal, on whatever nutrients accumulated along shipping lanes. Something had grown, and it was anchored along our patrol route. They sent a submersible drone, remote, heavily armored. I was in the control room when it descended. At 1,100 meters, the seabed looked normal, mud plains and scattered rock. Then we saw the hole. Not a crater, a vertical shaft punched straight into the sediment, wide enough to swallow a bus. The edges weren't collapsed. A vertical shaft punched straight into the sediment, wide enough to swallow a bus. The edges weren't collapsed. They were compacted, like something enormous had forced its way through repeatedly. The drone hovered closer. The shaft was dark, no visible bottom. The lights barely penetrated 10 meters before dissolving into black. Then the silt around the hole shifted, just slightly, like something breathing beneath it. The pilot froze the feed. No one spoke. The drone's depth gauge flickered. Then the sonar picked up a cylindrical mass coiled far below, layered segments, each thicker than a torpedo. It was anchored deep in the crust, body coiled vertically in a spiral like a living drill. The upper segment twitched, and the silt above it bulged. The pilot jerked the drone backward. Too slow. The sediment exploded upward. A massive, chitin-lined mandible shot out of the shaft. Not a head, just the mouth, ringed with serrated hooks. It snapped shut around the drone in a blur. The feed cut to static, and in the acoustic room, I heard the same suction pulse, but closer this time. Much closer. Because the tremor didn't descend immediately, it shifted laterally, under the seabed, toward our position. The officer beside me whispered, "How far are we from that shaft?" I checked the grid. My mouth went dry. 30 kilometers. The tremor was accelerating, not toward the last strike site, toward the harbor. And for the first time, I understood the pattern. It wasn't random predation. It was learning ship density. It was following traffic, and our base was the busiest cluster on the map. No one said evacuate. That word never came. Instead, they said things like monitor closely and adjust patrol routes and temporary maritime suspension. But you can't quietly suspend a naval harbor. You can't tell thousands of sailors, dock workers, and civilians to just avoid the water without explaining why. So they did what institutions always do. They minimized, and the tremor kept moving. I stayed in the acoustic room long after my shift ended. We had hydrophones spread in a wide perimeter around the harbor. Normally the screens were alive with ship noise, engines, ballast shifts, propeller cavitation. Now they were eerily sparse. Traffic had been reduced, but beneath the surface clutter, the low-frequency tremor threaded forward, segmented, heavy, deliberate. Every time it paused, the silt signature widened slightly on the grid. It was tunneling, not blindly, in arcs, mapping depth changes, underwater cables, foundations. When it hit rock shelf, it adjusted angle. When it encountered soft sediment, it accelerated. I watched its path redraw in real time like a subterranean serpent, and it was heading straight for the outer breakwater. At 2:47, one of the outer buoy sensors went dark. No alarm, just silence. I replayed the feed from 30 seconds earlier. There it was again, the suction pulse, then a metallic distortion, then nothing. The worm wasn't just striking hulls, it was sampling structures, testing resistance. The officer in charge ordered a depth charge deployment along the projected path. Controlled detonations. Low yield. The first one dropped at 3:12. The explosion registered clearly on the spectrogram. The tremor stopped for 12 full seconds. Hope does strange things to your body. It makes you breathe shallow, makes your ears strain for confirmation. Then the tremor resumed, stronger, faster. The depth charge hadn't repelled it, it had agitated it. The segmented waveform doubled in intensity, and its trajectory sharpened. Direct line, no more arcs. It wasn't hunting anymore, it was responding. At 3:29, the harbor wall shook, not violently, but enough that coffee in the break room sloshed over its cup. Above water, nothing breached, no plume, no visible disturbance. But my headset filled with the loudest suction resonance I had ever heard. Not one strike, multiple, rapid. The breakwater's foundation sensors went red. 3 seconds later, one of the outer patrol ships lurched violently against its moorings. Its hull alarm triggered. Perfect circular breach, inward bend, just like the others. The worm had extended vertically through harbor silt, struck, retracted, and it didn't need to surface to do it. It could stay buried, protected, invisible. They ordered all vessels to emergency undock, but moving ships created vibration. Propellers churned the water, and on my screen, the tremor reacted like a predator detecting thrashing prey. It split. That's the part that no one expected. The waveform divided into 2 parallel signatures, then 3, smaller amplitudes, faster. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a single organism, or, if it was, it had segments capable of independent extension, burrowed tendrils radiating outward from a central mass, like roots or feelers. The smaller tremors struck almost simultaneously. 2 civilian vessels took hits within 30 seconds. One sank outright. The other listed violently but stayed afloat. And then, for the first time, the seabed ruptured. Just beyond the harbor mouth, sediment erupted upward in a towering plume, not fully surfacing, just enough for the tip of it to break water. I saw it through the security cam, a chitinous column thicker than a lighthouse, ringed with serrated hooks rotating slowly around a circular mouth. It didn't lunge, it hovered, half exposed, testing air. Then it withdrew back into the sea with terrifying smoothness. The tremors converged again, reunified, and began retreating. Not panicked, not defeated, just finished. 3 ships down, 2 damaged, breakwater compromised, and it had only exposed a fraction of itself. In the days that followed, the official narrative called it subsurface geological instability. International maritime traffic was rerouted quietly. They deployed deeper seismic scanners. What they found made my hands shake. The central shaft beneath the original strike zone wasn't 40 meters deep. It extended nearly 2 kilometers into crustal sediment. And at the bottom, the mass wasn't coiled alone. There were branching tunnels radiating outward in multiple directions, some older, some fresh. This thing hadn't just grown, it had been there, dormant, possibly for decades, feeding on detritus, metal, whatever nutrients leached from shipping lanes. And as global maritime traffic increased, so did its size. Bobbit worms are ambush predators. They stay buried. They wait. They strike upward in milliseconds. Now imagine one that learned the density of ships above it. Imagine one that recognized vibration clusters. Imagine one that realized harbors concentrate prey. We weren't attacked because we passed overhead. We were attacked because we built cities over its feeding ground. And the worst part? It's not isolated. Shipping density maps show similar anomalies forming near Singapore, near Busan, near Norfolk. The tremor pattern is rare, but it's not unique. I still work sonar. I still sit in dark rooms listening to the ocean breathe. But now, every time I hear a low, segmented rasp beneath normal traffic, my throat tightens, because I know what it means. It means something enormous is repositioning beneath us. Not angry, not malicious, just hungry and patient. And if you've ever looked down at calm harbor water at night and thought it looked peaceful, remember this: the ocean doesn't need to breach to hunt. Sometimes it only needs to wait, and sometimes it grows larger than we ever meant it to. They transferred me after that. Not because I requested it, because I wouldn't stop flagging patterns. Every faint rasp in the seabed noise floor, every segmented tremor beneath shipping lanes, I logged them all. I overlaid density maps. I tracked seasonal cargo spikes. I built models that showed feeding corridors forming beneath the busiest maritime arteries on Earth. My supervisor called it fixation. I called it trajectory prediction. They reassigned me to a joint monitoring initiative outside Tokyo. Smaller room, fewer screens, same ocean, and the tremors followed. 6 months after Sasebo, a container vessel near Yokohama reported sudden ballast loss. No explosion, no collision, perfect circular breach, inward bend, the same signature. But this time the hydrophones were closer to urban coastline than open sea. I pulled the acoustic data myself. The tremor didn't approach from offshore. It came from beneath the bay, under the shipping channel. It had tunneled inward along sediment layers like a guided missile. And then I saw something worse. The segmented waveform paused not beneath the struck vessel, but beneath a cluster of undersea fiber optic cables. It lingered there, minutes. No strike, no rupture, just presence. Testing. Sampling vibration signatures, understanding infrastructure. Then it moved again, slowly, toward the artificial island foundations that support half the bay's industrial district. I requested emergency dredging. Denied. I requested seismic deterrent deployment. Denied. Insufficient evidence of biological origin, they said. Evidence. They always want evidence, as if the holes in steel weren't evidence enough. 3 nights ago, the tremor pattern changed. It wasn't deeper, it wasn't larger, it was higher, closer to the seabed surface. And it wasn't moving toward ships, it was moving toward land reclamation zones. Tokyo Bay is built on layers of compacted sediment and concrete reinforcement. Artificial ground, hollow beneath in places. I watched the spectrogram spike upward directly under Pier 7. There were no vessels docked there at the time, just warehouses, fuel storage, rail lines. The tremor accelerated vertically, and for the first time, it didn't retract immediately. The concrete apron above the pier cracked in a perfect circle, just 10 meters across. The surface sagged inward slightly. No explosion, no water plume, just collapse. Security footage later showed the ground sinking like something had withdrawn beneath it. They blamed subsidence, salt erosion. But I heard the suction pulse clearly, and I heard something else, a secondary resonance beneath it, shorter, sharper, echoing, like a smaller strike responding to the first. I overlaid the data with historical logs from Sasebo. The waveform patterns weren't identical, they were similar, scaled, which means one thing. It's not one gargantuan worm, it's a population, not dozens, not hundreds, but enough, deep enough, dormant, long enough, growing beneath the very shipping networks that feed them. Yesterday we lost contact with a deep-sea drilling platform south of Okinawa. No distress signal, just a sudden pressure drop in the drill column. The acoustic feed recorded the loudest rupture I've ever heard. Not metal tearing, not water rushing, something heavier, something thick, dragging. When they recovered fragments of the drill pipe, the edges were chewed, not cut. Chewed, serrated scoring consistent with segmented mandibles. The scale of the marks suggests a mouth diameter of at least 6 meters, and that was likely a juvenile. You want the part that keeps me awake? It's not the destruction, it's the pattern spacing. The tremors now register in intervals across major shipping corridors that align with nutrient plumes from ballast discharge, fish waste, and biofouling runoff. They've learned to cluster near us. We didn't stumble into their territory. We enriched it. We fed it. We created concentrated feeding grounds above their burrows. And like any ambush predator, they adapted. Tonight, I'm back on late shift. The bay looks calm through the operations window. Cargo ships drift in orderly lines. The city lights shimmer on the surface like nothing below could ever disturb them. But my headphones are on, and beneath the propeller wash, I hear it again. Low, segmented, not rushing. Not striking, positioning, and it's not coming from offshore. It's directly beneath the bay's central support pylons. I watch the grid. The tremor slows, then stops, not retreating, anchoring, like it's setting itself in place, waiting, maybe for traffic density to peak, maybe for vibration amplitude to rise, maybe for the next generation to mature beneath it. I don't know if we can stop something that burrows kilometers deep. Depth charges only irritate it. Dredging only exposes more soft sediment. And if we try to collapse the tunnels, we risk triggering mass subsidence under entire port cities. The ocean doesn't need to rise to drown us. Sometimes the ground just needs to disappear. The tremor just pulsed again, short, sharp, like a muscle testing tension. And for a second, I swear I heard more than one. If you work near a harbor, if you live on reclaimed land, if you ever notice a perfectly circular depression forming in asphalt after heavy maritime traffic, don't assume sinkhole. Don't assume erosion. Ask what's beneath the sediment. Ask what's been feeding there for decades. Because the ocean doesn't always send storms. Sometimes it sends teeth. And they don't need to breach the surface to pull an entire city down. It started at 4:11. No alarms, no explosion, just a subtle shift in the spectrogram that made my stomach drop before my brain caught up. The tremor beneath Pier 7 multiplied, not louder, layered. 3 parallel segmented signatures weaving together like braided cable. They weren't moving fast. They were aligning, directly under the load-bearing pylons. I switched to structural resonance monitoring. The pylons were humming, not from wind, from below, a low harmonic that matched the worm's rasping cadence almost perfectly. They weren't striking yet, they were sinking, learning the frequency that would weaken the foundation with the least effort. I grabbed the line to command, "Evacuate Pier 7 immediately." "On what grounds?" the duty officer asked. "On the grounds that something is tuning your infrastructure like a drum." There was a pause, then a sigh. "We'll send inspection." Inspection. By the time boots hit the pier, it would be too late. At 4:19, the first pylon shifted, not snapped, shifted. The tremor spiked upward in a sudden vertical surge, and instead of one suction pulse, there were 3, in perfect sequence. 1, 2, 3. The concrete above sagged inward as if gravity had intensified locally. Security footage later showed the pier deck folding in a neat, circular collapse, 20 meters across, without a splash, because the water beneath it didn't erupt. It was pulled downward. Something enormous had opened its mandibles beneath the sediment and created a vacuum pocket. The pier didn't explode. It was swallowed. Warehouses trembled as the collapse propagated laterally through undermined sediment. The tremors moved outward in widening arcs, each one probing the next support cluster. It wasn't frenzy. It was systematic deconstruction. I could see the pattern in real time. They were spacing their strikes to avoid destabilizing the entire bay at once. Controlled subsidence, selective feeding, avoiding catastrophic collapse that might poison their territory with debris. It wasn't destruction for destruction's sake. It was resource management. That's when it hit me. Bobbit worms are ambush predators. They anchor in sediment and wait for prey to pass within range. But this population, they had moved beyond ambush. They were engineering their feeding grounds, undermining artificial reefs of steel and concrete we built, concentrating detritus, letting structures fall into manageable sections, feeding on hulls, on biomass trapped in wreckage, on everything we dropped into their mouths. We didn't just build over their habitat. We constructed vertical farms for them. At 4:27, one of the tremors surged too high. A section of the worm breached the bay's surface for less than a second. The security cam caught it, a chitinous cylinder wider than a train car, segmented plates flexing as it withdrew. Water cascaded off serrated hooks that lined its circular maw. It didn't lunge at a ship. It snapped shut around a collapsing concrete slab midair and dragged it down, controlled, deliberate, gone. The feed cut. My headset filled with overlapping suction pulses. 3, then 4, then 5. The smaller signatures were joining. Juveniles, learning strike timing from the larger ones, mimicking rhythm. This wasn't a single gargantuan worm anymore. It was a colony, hierarchical, coordinated through vibration, communicating in pressure waves we only just started noticing. By 4:40, Pier 7 was gone, not shattered, removed. The water leveled over it like it had never existed. Emergency crews stood at a safe distance, staring at a smooth circle of disturbed surface. No thrashing, no visible threat, just absence. The tremors slowed, then descended, not fleeing, digesting, repositioning deeper, leaving behind a clean edge where infrastructure used to be. They shut down the entire bay by sunrise. Media called it unprecedented subsurface collapse. Geologists scrambled for fault line explanations, but I still had the acoustic logs, and I still hear it now, even as I sit alone in the monitoring room hours later.